In an ever-evolving digital landscape, for your business to thrive, you must adapt or die. Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the podcast helping you harness the power of AI and marketing tools to revitalize and grow your business. And now here's your host, marketing expert and author of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI, Emanuel Rose.
Welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Age of AI. Today we are going to continue our exploration of the overlap of SEO, GEO, AEO, and any other EOs that EIEIOs that Matthew can bring to our attention. Today we're joined by Matthew Edgar, a seasoned partner at Elementive, a consulting firm based in Colorado that specializes in technical SEO and AI search optimization. With over 20 years of experience, Matthew has an extensive track record of helping clients from ambitious startups to establish Fortune 500 companies resolve complex technical challenge and optimize their online presence for both generative AI and traditional search methodologies. He is also the author of Tech SEO Guide and Speed Metrics Guide, both recognized contributions to the field. Matthew's insights have been featured at industry-leading events like MozCon and SMX, and you can find out more about him at MatthewEdgar.net. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm really grateful for your time because I think this is such a foundational topic that all of us at both in SMB and mid-market need to pay attention to about how the change is happening.
Mm-hmm. And there's just a lot of change right now. I mean, SEO is kind of one of those disciplines that it's always changed, but it's definitely going through a more dramatic shift right now. And there's a lot of new things that we have to think about that maybe we haven't had to think about as much in the past.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, in SEO, we were really always most concerned with Google and Google's algorithm and wanting to capture that because they had 90+% of the market share and all that.
Right.
Now that's shrinking a little bit, and it's interesting to see how the LLMs have impacted search in that way. But then now we look and say, at least the research I did last week, which could be all different, was that chat had a majority of the LLM traffic, and so. Are you paying attention to chat primarily like you used to focus on Google? That's my first question.
I would say that chat's probably getting the bulk of the attention when it comes to that. And so it is requiring kind of a split focus between thinking about Google, because that's still very important. There's still a ton of people there that you need to think about, you need to optimize for. There are a ton of people with using ChatGPT as well. I would say that those are probably the two that get the majority of the focus. Perplexity probably is the other one that's getting at least some of the attention.
Yeah.
They aren't dominating as much as ChatGPT, but in certain industries, in certain niches, they actually are quite competitive, particularly e-commerce or retail. And I think especially as we think about Perplexity, right? They just rolled out like the new Comet browser. They're really pushing forward with the agentic side, where you're searching less for information, more searching for actions. So I could potentially see, Perplexity being a contender. So my advice to clients is, most of your attention, probably like 70, 80% of your attention should still be Google. But then the other 20%, probably most of it ChatGPT, paying attention to that. But reserve a little bit of attention for Perplexity as well.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm curious to know what your opinion is of the lm.txt file for websites.
I'm not sure what to make of it yet. What actually seems to come of it, how it actually seems to help, is very inconclusive right now at best. There are a few people saying, "Oh, look, we can get OpenAI to crawl our LLM s.txt file," and yeah, you can get a bot to crawl just about any file that you want them to. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're using that file
Right.
or that they're doing something meaningful with it. Google, for their part, has flat out said that this is not a file they are using. It is not a file they intend to use in any way. Several representatives from Google have come out just in the last couple of weeks and said as much. Claude, Anthropic, is the only LLM tool that's actually come out and said that they are going to probably support this in some way. OpenAI has been silent about the matter. They haven't said anything. Perplexity hasn't said anything either. So we don't know if they'll end up supporting it. Not to be lost in the conversation here, but we do have Microsoft with Copilot. They haven't said anything either. So none of the tools are saying that this is a thing that they're actually using. My other concern with the lms.txt file is that there's no clear standard around it. You look at the
Right.
examples of people who are doing it, it's all over the place with how they're structuring things, how they're including things. So without a clear format, clear standard, I just don't know how any of these tools will end up actually using it. Um, Unlike the robots.txt file or sitemap or schema or other things where there is a more clear protocol, there is a more clear standard, you can see their way to actually using it. I just don't see it here. I mean, it's worth testing out. Try it. Hey, if it works, great, you get results. I just haven't seen that yet. So
Yeah.
I give it a try, but I wouldn't have high hopes for it at this point.
So I guess, is there a negative to testing it on your site and then seeing what the results are?
There potentially could be a negative when it comes to Google. So Google may look at this file and they may think it's a low quality file on your site or unhelpful content on
Uh-huh.
your site because it creates just a static text file. And that file, by definition, by the LLMS protocol, is supposed to provide a list of pages and a summary of those pages on your site. So you're adding actual content. So Google may look at that and go, "What is this?" And that may actually harm your site quality, or may kind of end up as a file that Google is going to not pay attention to. Google, for their part, John Mueller actually has come out and said this. It was either John Mueller or Gary Ilias. I think it might have been both, who came out and said just in the last couple of weeks that if you are going to do an lms.txt file, be sure to have a no index on it to make sure that that file isn't going to be indexed by Google in any way. I've seen a couple people go after it, not so much with a no index, but a disallow just to prevent Google from crawling it. That can work. A no index is a little better, but that's the concern with the lms.txt file. So long as you have that no index in place, or a disallow if you can't do a no index to block Google, probably going to be safe to test.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, let's talk a little bit about your tech SEO guide that you published in was 23.
Yeah.
How much has changed from when you were doing your research in 22, publishing in 23 until now in 25? Where are we at with that?
Exactly. There are definitely things that have changed, and there are
Yeah.
definitely things that have shifted. At the same time, there's a number of things that haven't shifted or haven't changed, and I think that's what's actually interesting to me about AI search and everything. It feels like everything is new, everything is shifting, everything is changing. But you go back through it, what really helps AI search is getting the fundamentals right. It's
Okay.
getting the
Get
right
us those
technical.
fundamentals. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Lay it out.
exactly. You have to have good crawl paths. You have to have good internal linking structure. You have to have sitemaps. You have to have fast loading websites. You have to have websites that don't have redundant content or duplicate content. If you are migrating URLs, you have to do redirects correctly, and on and on. Right? There's a lot of different things, and that's what the book is really trying to capture. Is it's trying to capture what those fundamentals are. There's probably a few things in there that specifics that, yeah, they're a little bit different 2-3 years later, but a lot of those fundamentals still apply. It's still the same things that really will make a difference right now, both in traditional search with getting 10 blue links, but also showing up in Google's AI mode, or
Right.
showing up in a ChatGPT response. So I'm obviously biased, but I think the book is still a useful and good resource, even a couple of years later, and one that I've been told by others that they still are relying on it, still find a lot of value and benefit from it.
Yeah, right. I think that's always the critical part of when the shiny thing is out, that the fundamentals have got to be where we retreat to, right?
Mhm.
We got to say, well, interestingly, a lot of the GEO answers are coming from Google, or it's a resource for the LLMs. So
Right.
you still want to rank in Google, even if it's a secondary uh, part of the ranking, right?
Exactly. And you're totally right. I mean, as soon as you have the shiny object, that's where we all want to be. That's what we want to do. We want
Yeah,
to just, forget the past. Let's just focus on, this new fun, exciting, thing, and the fundamentals go. And no, actually the fundamentals apply. And I would say in some cases, the fundamentals actually apply more, now than they maybe even did in the past.
yeah, yeah. I think that's true too. Um, so we're kind of starting to get a little bit of, let's say, leveling out where Google isn't the number one, or not as dominant as the number one source anymore, and the LLMs are coming up as answer engines or shopping engines. What are you kind of projecting into the next 6 months about how we can continue to stay on top of being close to the top, or part of the answer engines?
I think there's a few things I'd point to. I mean, first is what we were just saying. Make sure you have the fundamentals in place.
Yep.
You still need a good site. You need clean HTML structures. You need clean content. You need all those things still very much apply. So uh, over the next 6 months, 12 months, that's a good place to focus on. The second thing I would say is this is also a really good time to talk to customers and talk to the people who are actually working with your business. Even if you can only talk to a handful of them, just actually talking to people. How are they using these tools or not? And I think what surprised a lot of clients I've worked with is when they make assumptions one way or the other. Either all of our customers are here, they're just doing this, or none of our customers are. And when they actually go and talk to people, they're finding it's a mixture of those different things. And by talking to people, you can get an idea of what kind of prompts they're entering in, if they are using agentic in some way to shop, and the results are pretty surprising across the board. And I think we need to do that to get some grounding around this. The other thing I would point to that I think makes sense to focus on through the next 6 months, especially, is there are a lot of new things. We need to make sure that our websites work with those new things. The newest shiniest object out here is Perplexity's Comet, ChatGPT's Agent. These are tools that can go and browse a website and conduct searches on a website and add items to a shopping cart on a website on your behalf without you having to visit. If your customers are trying to do that, can they do that successfully on your site? That's a big question. And in my testing with that, that's not always the case. There's a lot of websites where that's breaking down and not working correctly.
Well, how do we test that, and then how do we solve it? Let's go there.
Yeah. So taking the first part of that, how do we test it? So if you gain access to either Perplexity's Comet or ChatGPT's Agent, send tests through it. So give it instructions and say, hey, go to my website and do X, Y, and Z. Try to add these items to the cart. Try and fill out this form. Try and search for this product or filter these products in this way. Can it do it? In a lot of cases, it can, in which case, great. Then the question becomes a little more nuanced of, well, how did they do it? And can we tweak that a little bit? Or, you're almost doing usability testing for an
Yep.
agent
Right.
of, hey, is it actually, doing things in the way that I expected them to, returning the results I expected them to. If I gave it a task and said, hey, go find a product under $20 that meets criteria X, Y, and Z, and it found this, but I want to find this other thing. How do I change that? And so that gets into the second part of your question of, well, what do we do? So some of this comes down to some basic things with, are you prioritizing the right pages? So right, these agents are very sophisticated, very advanced tools, but they're also really dumb. They're going to just use the website and they're going to click on the links that are the most obvious to click on. So
Right.
in that example where, hey, go to my site and find something under $20 that meets X, Y, and Z criteria, it's going to go to the first thing that it finds, just as a person would. There's some basic things that we can just kind of shift and change with how we're presenting things. There's also some more advanced things and more complex things that we may need to do with changing how our website is rendered, which means how it's actually built and structured. So if you have a website that relies really heavily on JavaScript, that can present a lot of problems for agents and bots more generally to be able to use the website and accomplish things on the website. So you may need to rethink, how are we relying on JavaScript? How is our HTML actually put together? How are we actually structuring the code of this page? It becomes a bigger dev lift that may actually make sense to invest in. And in some cases, with some companies we're working with, it is a bigger investment that they are needing to make in order to clean up how the pages are actually constructed and put together.
Yep.
There's also other things that you can think about here too. With there's a lot of sites that have rightfully put in place protections to make sure that spam bots don't come through and fill out their forms and buy items on the cart or whatever. But all those spam protections also block agents. And so, how do we balance those two and make sure?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't want spam, but we do want this. Now, it's not as clear to say, oh, I'm going to add a captcha to my form. Well, adding a captcha to your form might actually make it harder for an agent to do the things they need to do. How do we balance those two? And it's not
We're gonna
entirely
need that
obvious.
standard, right? We're
Yeah,
gonna need that standard. We're gonna need an agents.txt, and so for the
right.
handshake to happen, right, in order to have the marketplace catch up with the technology.
Yeah, and I think that's the very phrase that we're going to be living here for probably the next 6 to 12 to 18 months is catching up with the standard, actually having standards around this. What does this look like? And I guess that would, as we think about what the next 6 months are, uh, I think everybody needs to just be very, very flexible and very, very willing to just experiment, know that a lot of things are not going to work, and that's okay. And I think that's important message to get out there, because I think there's a lot of people who expect SEO to be very predictable at this point,
Right.
and maybe it could been at some point in the past, but it is definitely not there now. We are at a point where we have to just kind of get scrappy and try a lot of things that we're probably going to just pitch, and then we're going to try a whole bunch of other things that we're probably just going to pitch, and then we're just going to have to keep doing that until there are clear standards. And there will be at some point, I have no doubt. But when that happens, what those look like, if I could tell you that, I would. I'd be using my crystal ball for predicting everything about the future.
Right. Well, so one of the nice things is that we can, at a level, just go to ChatGPT and say, "Please crawl my website and let me know how I can make this better, so you can find answers from prospects and clients." Right. So, say we do that, and then what's kind of the next thing that a group would do to prepare to then get in touch with you and get help from what you're doing at Elementive?
Yeah. So I think if you are starting to notice that, as you talk to ChatGPT about your business, if it's getting things wrong or if it can't access your website, that's usually a good indication that there is something deeper going on that does require an investigation. And what I've been finding is that does tend to point to some fundamental technical problems with how the site is built or how the site is constructed or the server's configuration that's preventing it from being able to access the website correctly. So if you are, testing that out, you are trying things with ChatGPT or any of the others, Perplexity, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, whatever it is, and if you're seeing, hey, this just isn't quite right, then that's usually a good time to take a deeper dive into things. The other one I would point to as a good point to reach out, and a big area of focus, is how do we measure any of this? These
Yeah.
AI tools are providing some level of value for your business right now. They are at some level probably mentioning your business, mentioning your products, mentioning your services, or comparing you to competitors. And we want to have some way to try and capture that value. And it's not entirely clear, how we can capture the full extent of that, but there are some things that we can start doing, some things we can start looking at. That would be the other big challenge that I would say is a good time to probably reach out. And a bigger problem to start tackling is, how do we start assessing at least some of this value so that we can make a correct investment. Kind of going all the way back to that first question you asked of, how much do we focus on Google versus ChatGPT? It's like, well, we kind of
Right.
need to measure it to know, how much is really here right now, versus just relying on assumptions.
Yeah. So it's kind of pushed back the testing back onto the individual brand versus having a really clear uh, set of activities to do to get results that we need. That's what I'm
Mhm.
hearing.
Yeah, there isn't a clear set of activities. I don't think anybody at this point knows what that set of activities are. There's a lot of people claiming they do. There's a lot of
Sure.
people who, they're fully experts and they know every detail and they know how to optimize for these. They don't. Nobody does.
Right. Right.
Um, and uh, as you said, I mean, I read this thing last week. This seemed like a good thing a week ago. Now it's outdated.
Yeah.
And I'm running into that. I've tried writing, articles about things, and I'll go back a month later, a couple weeks later, and like, oh well, this is horribly dated, and I need to scrap it and completely rewrite this thing because it's constantly changing. So it does necessitate a lot of testing right now, just to try and understand what works. And there's a lot of value within that of just trying to test, try to learn, try to understand these systems, and try to stay on as much as you can on top of things and just get a sense of how do these work.
Yeah. I think in that way, it's an unprecedented time in that literally, like you're describing, things are out of date faster than we've ever seen. I mean, there have been changes in the AI space just while we've been talking here, and it's like every hour the machines are learning and the humans are thinking and changing, and then the wash is so instantaneous that we've never
Yeah.
seen this before. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The pace of this is pretty astounding. And I mean, I say that as somebody who, I started off, doing this work in the early 2000s as SEO was kind of becoming defined and as websites were starting to really just become a standard. And then lived through mobile and everything there. And yes, those were big changes and disruptive in their own ways, but the pace was a little easier to keep up with. It was still fast, but it wasn't quite as aggressive as what we're seeing with AI. And that's where, it is a notable difference. And I think uh, I've been, telling a lot of clients, who just, the question I keep getting is, I feel behind. I feel like I'm not keeping up with any of this. And I just keep having to tell clients, nobody is.
Yeah,
That's
it's
okay.
impossible. Yeah.
Do the best you can. Try to test what you can. Obviously, that's part of what I'm helping clients with is trying to stay current on things, test things, as well. That's the best we can do right now. Is try to read as much as you can, learn as much as you can, test as much as you can, but
Yeah.
also know that eventually we're going to get to standards. It's just, can you kind of wait it out until then and test enough till then?
Yeah. Well, I love it. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and thanks for being a patient guest and answering all my questions. And I'm grateful for your time, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you, and we'll have links to all your details in the show notes, and probably reach out to you again in a few months and get you back on the show so we can see what's changed in 3 or 4 months.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and hold on for me while I close out the show.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's good to have the perspective of staying with fundamental activities and making that a bulk of the work that you're doing, and then push into experiments to see how some of the big players are responding to what you're doing. So at this point, chat is around 60% of the LLM market. Anthropic is the next big player, Google, Microsoft Copilot, and Perplexity is only 6%, but it is worth watching and playing in their space because they're setting themselves up as the shopping engine. And so that being the case, it's important for, at the very least, for the e-commerce brands to experiment inside of that environment. I hope you found this conversation uh, with about GEO valuable, and that in the coming week that you spend some time testing and trying AI software that can free up some time, hopefully capturing that 5 to 10 hours that a lot of us are reporting by creating automated processes or other AI supported activities, and then with that time that you spend it to continue to upskill, or spend with your friends and your family, or that you get outside and spend some time in nature and get away from the screens. This is Emanuel Rose, Marketing in the Age of AI.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.